he comes in tight on me, does an Osodogari, which I didn't know what that even was then, arm bars me, and I'm on my back. I don't know what to do. I didn't know anything about tapping, so I started yelling, "Uncle." I was like, "Uncle, uncle, uncle." I didn't know what to do, but that's when I really gravitated towards the grappling arms at that point.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. On today's episode, I'm joined by Dave Lashley. Dave, thanks for being here. Looking forward to our conversation. And to all of you out there, thanks. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for joining us on the top traditional martial arts podcast, Martial Arts Radio. As I'm recording this is going to be close to episode 1100. We're 10 years in. It's crazy to think about this journey. And how do we get here? It's because of all of you. Thank you for your continued support. And the number one thing you can do to help support us is help us build these numbers. So share an episode, subscribe wherever seems appropriate, and of course, join the email list. You'll find a link to sign up for the emails everywhere that we post these. And what do you get in the emails? Well, we send you behind the scenes and clips and sort of things. You know, if Dave and I do something particularly goofy today that doesn't make it into the episode, maybe we'll share it with you there. I don't know. But regardless, thanks for spending some time with us. And with that, Dave, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Appreciate your time. You know, when I saw the info about you come across, I was really excited because you do a job that I don't think we've ever had anybody on the show that does your job. And you can imagine 10 years in, all these episodes we've done, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I actually, I get that a lot. Even a lot of the law enforcement guys that I know will say that retired, and they're like, I know some bailiffs, but I've never really talked to one before.
Yeah. I've got to imagine that everyone's understanding or everyone's thought of what their understanding is comes from TV and movies. When you ask me to picture a bailiff, I'm either picturing somebody who's overly serious or I'm picturing Bull from Night Court.
That's usually the top one that I get, and it doesn't help that I haven't haircut.
You and I are similar. I didn't cut my hair this morning, but yeah, we both have some glare going on.
Yeah.
Why a bailiff? Or how a bailiff? Was it choice or did you fall into it?
I kind of fell into it. I started off in juvenile court 25 years ago as a probation officer in a unique position, and we call it an alternative center here in Knox County. And the alternative center was basically a school that if they was having some troubled youth, they would send the kids to this school so they could still participate in the educational system, but it had a lot more restrictions to it. And I was the guy who, if that kid acted up, I removed him from their situation or helped the teachers and stuff. And I did that for a while, and we had a opening in the court system for court security. It was better pay per se, but really for me has always been training. It caught my eye was, we'll send you to the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy for bailiff school. And I'm like, well, that sounds kind of neat, so why not? So I really, really worked hard to get it just because I thought I was going to get, and I did. I got more free training. And within a year, the bailiff that I replaced, he wasn't from around here, and he moved back home and took a job back to his hometown. So I kind of fell into it. There was not any point in my life, especially in high school, I thought, hey, I'm going to grow up to be like Bull from Night Court.
Such a great show. Everybody out there, if you're I mean, I was kind of on the younger end. I'm 46, but I'm going to guess that I doubt anybody younger than 40's seen that show. It's
Right,
a
right.
great show. It was a wonderful sitcom.
Yes.
It's what launched John Larroquette, right?
Yeah.
Um, who I bet a bunch of people will recognize the name. So I want to go back in a second and talk about the work you were doing pre-Bailiff, right? Because the world has changed in how you work with kids that need that physical. I mean, maybe restraint is too broad of a term, but Bailiff school, is it obvious what's going on there, or how? I don't quite know the question I'm trying to ask. I'm trying to ask something about Bailiff school because I don't even know enough about what the differences would be to ask a smart question. Maybe you can help me out.
So back then, the academies for law enforcement, they had a police academy, and then there was a bailiff academy.
Okay.
The police academy was much longer. I can't remember. I mean, it's quite a few hours now for the police academy. But back when I started, it wasn't. It was probably about half.
Mm.
I'm not giving it justice, but I want to say, probably 300-hour academy or
Okay.
something. And then the bailiff academy, ours was 160 hours.
Mm.
So because obviously we don't use vehicles. I don't need to know how to do stops from a car and stuff like that. So it was just giving you a basic understanding of the judicial system, 40 hours of firearms, 40 hours of defensive tactics, and then the rest was all like working inside of a courtroom itself, or understanding the laws and what we can and cannot do from
Mm.
it. Where a law enforcement officer, much more in depth what they have to go through and stuff like that. So, and I don't think they even have the Bailiff Academy anymore.
Mm.
It's it had like a week course. It's in a lot of retired law enforcement or people in law enforcement get into it.
Okay.
So they didn't have to have it a long academy like they did for when I went through.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. And so your prior role, you said, if I heard you correctly, removing children from the classroom if it was
Yes.
necessary, and that's a subject that anybody, and we do have a lot of teachers in our audience, knows it's a delicate subject
Hmm.
because of the restrictions that have been placed on them. I know that at least some of those restrictions were not there when I was a kid because of things I saw. What was that role like then? Maybe beginning to end of that role. How long were you in that position?
About a year.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
year.
not long enough for it to have a huge change. Maybe you can just comment on what that was like for you.
So what I did learn, though, what I've learned even as I do with adults, if I can even do the same like procedures, but what I found out with juveniles was when I would go into a classroom, the first thing that I would usually do when they said that, such and such kid is acting up, we need him removed. I never removed him first. I removed everybody else in the classroom.
Hmm.
Once you take away their performance, people that you can perform
Hmm.
to, it you can talk to them much
Hmm.
easier. And most generally, there are some, you can reason with them to enough to get them to comply to what you needed them to do. But it's amazing, and adults get like that too.
Yeah.
If there's an audience, people like to perform sometimes, and I tried to eliminate that first before I would actually have to use a hands-on, and I did, but you did approach it differently, obviously, than you did an adult.
Yeah.
But make no mistake, there's plenty of 14-year-old, 15-year-old teenage young men that were much larger than a lot of adults I've ever had to deal with.
Hmm.
And I think
Mm,
that's sometimes the misconception, kind of forgot that just because they're youth, that they're not as, maybe could be as dangerous or violent acting. That's not always quite the case. I mean,
sure.
there's some big kids out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm aware. I'm very aware. Your Now your martial arts training predates all this, right? It goes back
Yes.
at some point. So we'll get there, but this is probably where we would have the subtitle of the episode, your book, if we did such a thing. What was it from that you're working with children and the time working with a bailiff as a bailiff that informed your understanding of violence and your martial arts training that maybe the rest of us don't have?
Um, that was probably the biggest step. Was like, I trained for him since I was really in my teens, martial
Mm,
arts, but you always, your theories got put to play. Like,
mm,
and that was what was probably the biggest confidence builder, to just knowing what you thought you weren't, you thought would work, doesn't work. It was like, it was just a real reality check. And it's been like that ever since. I've been doing this job, and other jobs I do outside too. But that was probably the biggest thing when it comes to the martial arts. It's like you started to understand a little bit more about why you would do certain things in a sparring class or a regular
mm,
class, and you're like, well, why didn't this work? Well, maybe because the person in front of you is really not trying to hurt you, and there's a little bit of more of it's just a friendly competition at
mm.
the end of the day. So it was more like the theories of things. It was like the big thing that I got from the
Okay.
jobs over the years and the martial arts.
Were those difficult lessons to learn?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
and so many aspects of it, and not just because, say, something failed, because you're like, that just didn't work, but you we put, especially when we're, I think, newer in the martial arts, you put such of my sensei or instructor, that how could they're not going to show me anything wrong.
Right.
Everything they show me is like a superhero of some sort.
Well,
So
it must
you
be you. You must be implementing it wrong.
yeah, and so it was early on. It was like, well, this has to work because he said
Mm,
so. And then when you find out more, is like that it was more just as a teaching session. They're teaching you. They've never
mm.
applied it before, besides outside of the dojo.
Right.
And so it was a what more of that when I was younger,
Mm,
because I just wanted to, all my instructors are of the world, and they are great men, great people.
yeah.
Not, but I just thought they were invincible, is maybe the word, and so they're teaching me invincible stuff, and it was a little bit of a reality check.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have that experience at some point, and it's sad, but it's part of the reason I see people step out of competition or double down on some of their opinions or their beliefs because they start to get an awakening. I mean, I had one. I'm not going to talk about it here. I've talked about it a few times, and just wow, okay, the world's a little different than I thought it was. And that's terrifying. And I think the longer you've been training, the more terrifying that is. So
Yeah.
maybe this is a good time for us to go back. You said you started training as a teenager. What, when, why, how? Tell us about that.
I'm a lot like you always hear. I was a huge Bruce Lee fan I mean, I couldn't wait for Saturday night Kung Fu Theater.
Mm,
Yeah, it was all of those shows. I just really enjoyed it. And I started really early in Kempo. It was all we had here locally.
mhm,
And a guy was a great guy, Steve Hatfield. And the older I got, I got into high school athletics and other types of athletics. And then I had an uncle who was a Shotokan black
mm,
belt. So I really liked that as well. But he was really into the sparring aspect of it. So I think everybody, especially when you're young, you gravitate to anything. You get a punch more than doing forms
sure.
and stuff like that. So karate was really my basis. Some form of karate was how I started with at a young age, and didn't stay consistent through my junior high school years, but was like on it because of the sports. It would, but I'd always, when off season, I'd always go back to the martial arts. And like I said, Bruce Lee was probably my the biggest influence of all the ones. And then after that, Chuck Norris, because
Sure.
in Return of the Dragon, he gives Bruce Lee the hardest fight. So I had to find out who this guy was, and that's when I found Black Belt magazine.
Mm,
And Black Belt, I mean, your last guest, Larry
Larry Tatum.
Tatum.
Yeah.
Man, I read his stuff about him all through my whole youth. I mean, to me it was a great episode because it just brought
Thank
back
you.
all these childhood
Thank you.
and get her and
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't forget that hair. I
no,
made a
no,
little bit of a joke with Mr. Tatum. I mean, just absolutely iconic person from that time,
yeah,
and his hair didn't hurt. I
yeah,
mean,
that's it,
given the two of us and our similar hairstyle, I'm going to call it that.
yeah.
Right?
But him and Jeff Speakman, I mean, those were the
Yeah.
guys back then, and Chuck Norris and Joe
Hmm.
Lewis and all of them. And so it was just like I gravitated that way.
Mm,
And then when I got out of school, I got married, and pretty early we had children shortly after we were married, and kind of got away from training. And then I gained a lot of weight, and
mm,
my doctor just pretty much said, "I'm not putting you on medication. You need to go find something that you enjoy to do, and it can't be golf because you'll get a cart." So you need. So I'm like, I'm going to go back to training
mm,
martial arts, and I went to Georgiana Reno was my instructor, which is more of a Shotokan style, but he was a boxer at heart.
mm.
So we started to do a lot of sparring. He emphasized sparring more than the kata aspect of things, and so I gravitated toward that. And during that time frame, I remember sparring a black belt, and I was probably a brown belt at the time, and I'm much bigger than this guy and Mike, and I just felt like I'm just peppering this guy. I'm really. Then all of a sudden he comes in tight on me, does an Osodogari, which I didn't know what that even was then, arm bars me, and I'm on my back. I don't know what to do. I didn't know anything about tapping, so I started yelling "Uncle." I was like, "Uncle, Uncle, Uncle." I didn't know what to do, but that's when
Mm.
I really gravitated towards the grappling arts
Okay.
at that point.
So, what was it you were doing professionally after high school?
I kind of bounced. I was more
Okay.
like just like and where I got the influence towards my brother was a cop his whole
Okay.
time, and he was 1 year younger than me. Um, so he always kept pushing me, get into this profession, get into this, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah, it
Mm,
was I really just wanted to make money to live. I
yeah.
didn't really have anything that really caught my eye, especially when I've been married a couple years at this point. Then we had our first child. Then it's about paying bills
Right.
like that. So
What? I grew up an only child, but I've had enough friends with siblings. Was there something familiar about the we'll call it wrestling, right? The transition from punching, getting punched, to next thing
Yeah.
you know, wait a second. I would imagine you and your brother, especially if he ended up as an LEO, probably were rough and tumble kids with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to remember in the 80s, pro wrestling was huge.
Okay, so now we've got that piece on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining you laying on your back, yelling "Uncle," and being shocked and wanting more. I mean,
Yeah.
is that a reasonable
Oh,
characterization?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I probably had a good 70 pounds on the guy I was going against.
Even better. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, this made sense to me. Like,
Mhm.
this, I didn't want to, like, quit the striking arts by any stretch. I wasn't one of these guys that said grappling or jujitsu's end all of all. You know, I just knew I needed to add this to it.
Okay.
You know, because I firmly believe, yeah, like you'll hear the argument, all fights go to the ground, but 100% of them start standing. So I,
Yes.
you got to have both when it comes to especially self defense
Yeah. I've always
aspects.
said a well-rounded martial artist is a better martial artist.
Yes, I agree.
So you take that incident and what do you do? Was there enough of that focus in that martial arts school that you could stay there, or did you say I need to do more and elsewhere?
I did a little bit because they had like their form. It was Seikon Jiu Jitsu, but it was more of an Aikido type base
Okay.
Jiu Jitsu. So it kind of entertained me for a while until it was like I want more of this ground stuff, you know. And so I then went out and then Black Belt magazine in the back, and I'm like, there's this ad for Shingitai Jiu Jitsu, Perrysville, Ohio. And I'm like, Perrysville, Ohio is like 30 minutes from my house. So I called this guy, sent him a letter because there wasn't like really email or nothing back then. And he lets me come out, and to find out his name was John Saylor. John Saylor was a former judo Olympian and an
Mm,
Olympian judo coach of '84. He was coach of the year. So that was grappling at a whole nother level uh, that I learned so much. And like, I was just at awe how I was just being thrown around. And John did, and I wish I could remember the name, a, a former bare knuckle karate when he was in Japan training judo and
mm,
stuff. So he did combine like using striking to get in close to, make that clinch of some sort. So it wasn't just straight up like you see most Brazilian Jiu Jitsu today, where it's just all about grappling. But in that process, one of the students was a purple belt underneath Helson Gracie lineage, and then he just could tell how much I loved jujitsu. So
mm.
it's like, hey, come to class with me, or we trained off to the side. So he showed me something a little bit different.
But
So
that's pretty early for BJJ.
yeah, this was probably 90 2000, around
Okay.
2000
Okay. So
at
not
this point.
super early, but still,
Yeah, for
there
jujitsu.
there it was still kind of fringe
Yeah,
back then.
there were no black belts in Ohio
Mm.
at that point. And when you saw a blue belt, purple belt, you thought the holy grail of grappling would just showed up in Ohio. That was a
Yeah.
big deal back then for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Right. Wow. Okay. So, you're doing this other stuff. You're experimenting. You're rounding out what you're doing. I've got to imagine that you start getting healthier.
Hmm.
So that's feeling good.
Yeah.
Um, you sound like the type of person who, I don't want to say fully immerses. You sound a little more balanced than
Yeah.
that. Did you have support from your family
For
as you're
the
doing this?
For the most part, I mean, my wife, eh, so my wife knew me better than most. She was my next door neighbor since I've been in the first grade.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, we knew each other. We dated all through school. So she knew what she was getting into per se. And when I do like something like that, I have a tendency to really, maybe become obsessive with it. Like I want to learn more and more about it. So she accepts to this day. She plans the vacation. I think she even intentionally looks before if there's a jujitsu school or Krav Maga school or something around that because she knows I want to train at different places
Yeah.
with that.
Oh,
So
cool. Okay. So where, because it's such a significant point for you, where do you finally say, you know what, I'm going to take my brother's advice and I'm going to make a shift into the law enforcement world?
so probably about 29, he comes to me about this job at the alternative center, and he's like, "This job's coming open. I know the person real well who's would interview for this. You have a really good chance." And he's my younger brother, and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know if I want to do that." And he's just like, "You have a child, get a career. You got to start looking at a career." And he was right. At that
Mhm.
point, I was like, "Yeah, maybe it's something I should." But I never really wanted to ever be a police officer. It's like, because I thought he was trying to force me become a police officer like him. Like, we'll get you in the academy. Like, this is just a trick to get me into the police academy. It was just something I didn't want to go that route per se. But I'm that's when I got into that at that point. So
Okay. All right. And was that the first time you had to, I guess, use your training? Had it all been theory prior to taking that position?
pretty much, I mean, because everything I did before was inside of a dojo.
Mm.
And so, I mean, even though you're being very competitive, you still knew the person across from you didn't really want to hurt you per se, and so it was a real eye opener.
Mm.
Like here's a 12 or 13-year-old kid that in the dojo I'm moving men with that, ooh, that didn't work so well.
Mm. Do you remember the first one that made you go, wait a second?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Can
With
you
it.
tell us about it?
Yeah. I mean, I just remember the teacher asked me to come in, and where the real reality was, I come in, I'm going to restrain the kid. He just refused. He wasn't being combative as like he's ready to like throw hands or something. Like, I'm not leaving type.
Mm.
And he kind of stands up, so I go in and grab a hold of. But what I what's something that's not in a dojo when you're practicing stuff? Desk, chairs,
Mm.
all these objects, and they're getting in my way. and
Yeah.
and even trying to move him, it's like, oh, I just grabbed, and that seemed like the most logical way to go because that's the way I should go.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, because there's things there. There's humans. There's other humans watching at this time. And so it was just like a whole other way of thinking about,
Mm.
like, you're in an wide open gym space. And when you move towards people in a gym, they move out of your way.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're not doing that.
What I find interesting about this ideal, we've heard plenty of people. You've probably had friends and maybe even people you've trained with who have bounced at bars,
I've done
and
that
that's
too.
an okay. You've done that. So
Yeah.
what I find interesting about bouncing is your there's an imbalance generally in your willingness to commit violence. The drunk jerk doesn't really care about you that much.
Yeah.
You have to care about them somewhat because it's your job and you don't want to go to jail. And if the bar gets a reputation for being too heavy-handed, it hurts business, right? you know
Yeah.
but when it's a kid, that disparity is even bigger. And
Mhm.
so I'm thinking about all these things that are these subjects within martial arts. And I'm sure you've heard people make, well, I just carry a gun. Well, a gun's really bad at doing anything other than killing people. So you need tools for violence that's less serious. But when you're talking about a kid,
Yeah.
now it's even, I don't want to say less serious because it's still serious, but you're trying to do zero damage. I would
Yeah.
assume that that's the standard, but they don't have that same concern for you.
Well, and the judge at that time, and I'm assuming that's still no different to this day, but at that time, I mean, hitting, striking wasn't an option
Right.
whatsoever. No matter if they're throwing it back at you, that it just was not an option
Hmm.
with that because of it was being a child like that or a kid. So,
How much training did you get for that position?
actually, I mean, I hate to say it, at that time, nothing.
Mm.
No, I mean, I got your basic orientation to the job, what's going to be expected of you, things like that. But actually, when it came to, hey, by the way, we need you to remove this, this person. This is how we want you to do it. No, there really wasn't back then. I think
Mm.
that's all changed. Obviously, this is you're talking 20+ years ago, 25 years ago. So I know it's changed.
Yeah, I've got to imagine, and I'm gonna work hard not to say anything that seems identifiable. I know people who work in public schools, and what is considered acceptable mainstream behavior has changed so dramatically
Oh yeah,
that I would imagine what you were doing then, because we're going, how far back are we going?
25 years.
Okay. So 25 years ago, what was considered fringe and you have to be in these other classes is now being mainstreamed in a lot of cases with one-on-one paraeducators. And so I'm having conversations with people who they go into the job kind of with a similar setup that you have. Here's the job orientation, here's what's expected, here's what you can't do. But it's almost that there seems to be a lack of available options. I hear these stories about kids throwing rocks and up turning over desks and throwing chairs and books, and the people that are charged with keeping them and the other kids in the classroom safe can't even restrain.
Mhm. And it seems to be, I mean, different from state to state too.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I mean, and probably even school district to school district at this point. I'm because that every school district's probably going to treat a little bit different. And at the alternative center, what they call, like I said, you had a little bit more leadway because they've already been they're on probation.
Okay,
Yeah, at
they've
this
crossed a
point.
legal boundary at
Yeah,
some point.
yeah. So it was but you still, there's still a certain way you had to handle it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
um, that must have been an exhausting job.
it was, yeah. it, it was definitely, started to give me a different perspective towards the stains as the rest of my career. It's hard not, you're influenced by what you see on a
Yeah.
regular basis.
Is that why you were there a year and switched into being a bailiff?
I'm not gonna tell you it wasn't, but the right opportunity just
Okay.
come forward. Like, so that, yes and no. It was, I probably would have started looking to go into some other uh, area. I might have even went to the police academy at that point.
Your brother would have been happy. Okay.
So
So, you know, you're certainly not the first person. I think I said this before that has this these epiphany experiences, and it changes the way they train. So you talked about that young child and it not working. Oh, there's desks in the way. There's other people in the way. They're not being compliant. What was your takeaway for your training? How quickly did that change your training? What did you do with that experience?
So as time went on, especially when I went to, per se, we call it the adult court, or the court at that point, and became a court security to then like the bailiff and stuff. What I started to learn real quick was preparing for the day, preparing for what, like, I could have got the same information probably. I know I could have, like, asked the probation officers a little bit more about the kids in the classroom, to what they've done, what should I be paying attention to, maybe ask the teachers a little bit more information. Could have made my job a little bit easier, just getting to know more information. And that's what I found the longer I do this, is knowing more what you're getting into and understanding it makes things go so much easier with it. That it even helps you prepare, I think, more if there is a physical altercation. You're getting a pretty good idea of what you're getting ready to deal with before not knowing any information before I go. So I prepare the day, talking to others quite a bit on a daily basis. I make it a real regular habit. So
You talked towards the top about, I guess we'll call it the psychology of, they're looking for an audience in a lot of cases. Let's get everybody else out of the room. Let's remove the audience. And then I have an option for de-escalating the situation. How much understanding of de-escalation did you have from your martial arts training versus on the job and that professional training?
Quite a bit. It just depends, like, and you've probably seen this. It's just who you train with.
Sure.
Some coaches would really emphasize about how to prevent and how not to let this escalate any farther. To other coaches is you've trained for this moment, and you get ready, and so it just, like, I started gravitating towards, like, more combatives at that point. So a lot of the coaches would emphasize, like, how to de-escalate something always first, and especially when I went through the academy for the bailiff school, part of I think we had just an 8 hour, but it was just like how to talk to people and trying to understand them a little bit better and what they're experiencing. And it does help quite a bit. I think de-escalation should always be your first form. And between awareness and de-escalation is probably when I do teach self-defense, I probably spend just as much time on those two subjects as much as the physical, if not more time on those two subjects than the physical aspect of things.
The physical stuff is far more fun, but I think far less useful.
Yes.
And you brought that up, that you are an instructor now. You do have your own school. At what point did you add that to the mix?
Yeah, I put it in pretty quick. When you set through one of my first trials as a bailiff that I set through was, and everybody's heard this scenario before, and so this particular case was, you had a guy drinking at a bar, guy comes up for whatever reason, don't know why, never really got the truth why, just kind of bullying or picking. Guy drinking, he leaves, goes to a different bar. He's going to try to de-escalate. He doesn't want to deal with it. Guy follows him to the next bar. They get into it the next one. So there's a local, at one time, there was like a little local restaurant that served the people who drank at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. They get into it outside of that. The guy follows them to the place, and they're outside and they're arguing. And the guy finally is like, I'm tired of you. Leave me alone. And the opposite person pushed him. The guy said, that's it. So hits him. Guy hits his head on the curb. He's life flighted. So all of a sudden, he's now in a jury trial, sitting in front of 12 jurors, trying to convince them that, yeah, I know there was nobody behind me and I could have walked away still again, but I just couldn't take it anymore. And that's when I was like, I have to emphasize the de-escalation aspect more. Like, the man in us says, I don't want to walk away. I gotta prove a point here.
Right.
But you gotta think everything through. And so when I seen it firsthand, not from a TV show or a movie, this is like I'm literally watching this guy's really sweating some bullets. And for the sake of it, he got found of a lesser charge, but he still was found guilty.
He was found guilty.
Yes.
He did everything that I would say most martial arts schools teach.
Yes.
Because let's face it, given enough opportunities, the guy following him is probably going to initiate.
Yeah.
And you were probably raised as I was. If you know that it's imminent,
Yep.
you hit first.
Yes. Well, that's taught. I mean, preemptive striking. That's what we call it. and as I said, I understand to a point, why you think you can do that. But like I said, and over the last 25 years, I've sat through 4 of those type of trials. And every one of them have been found guilty of something. Like I said, maybe not as harsh, but still, you're still a felon. You've still been found guilty, and you still got jail time out of it. Maybe not going to the penitentiary, but.
So how do you, given that you've seen that 4 times, how does that change your de-escalation training with your students?
So that's what that's why I add the awareness aspect into it. Things could have changed maybe. I don't know what the jurors would have did, but if the guy could have said, hey, I saw a gun, I saw a knife, I saw pepper spray, something that maybe could have gave them a little bit more warrant to use force, because you're truly now can say you're in jeopardy. Maybe you feel for your, so threatening to your life more because you see a weapon, and I don't have one. So that's why I pay attention to what's in front of you, but then also pay attention what's behind you, and it's going to be hard. Walk away.
Yeah. How related are de-escalation and ego?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's
because that's what I'm thinking, right? Like I'm putting myself in that situation, and I had a situation over the summer. I was at a concert, and I picked this guy out of the crowd, and he was hammered when he got there. It was an outdoor. It was a country show of all things. Dustin Lynch, for anybody out there, right? Like not exactly a rough and tumble crowd as you might expect, especially up here in Vermont. And I spotted this guy as a problem at the beginning, but I admit it. Ego did not want to leave the show. I did not want to. People I was with, we'd found a good spot to watch. I didn't want to leave. And leave me alone. Don't touch me. We're not friends. No, we're good. Yes, I forgive you. Super drunk. And eventually there was a point, and I remember that feeling. I remember that inner conflict of, my ego is, I am having to suppress this so much. I'm really struggling at this point versus the de-escalation.
Yeah. No, and everybody's experienced that. I mean, who hasn't at some point experienced road rage? And at the end of the day, I mean, like you said, the ego plays a big factor. I can't let this person up me and something. And I think that's probably if once you check that a little bit, it makes de-escalation a lot easier.
Sure.
A
So
lot
how do you address, because you're aware of that and because you've seen it, what are you doing with your students? I mean, is it simple? Is it lecture? Is it conversation? Are there drills?
We do. I always usually like one of the classes I teach is like a self defense class here at Tactics. Or we call it a Krav Maga class because we I'm certified in Krav, but and it's I always at the end though, like when we're doing something that's really say a little bit more violent than necessary, is like this is how they'll teach you, but this is what I'm going to tell you how you probably should approach it with it. I try to give like two sides of the version of it because I think in a lot of these martial arts that we've seen, especially from other countries, uh, this isn't Israel. This isn't the Gaza Strip, and I think that stuff has to be brought up, like some of the other countries that that maybe resolving something is okay by just throwing hands in the street,
Yeah.
and they're well, it's not okay here, and you need to know that. So sometimes I think I just by emphasizing, remember where you're at, kind of attitude that helps quite a bit. But I always try to, and I always tell them like I'll give it like, hey, or what could happen, I could be in court and I'll tell them, hey, I was just in court 2 days ago and this is what happened. And this is when the guy did this. So just remember that. So I try to use those experiences that I have to help them think more de-escalation than going to the I hate violence right
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Are you still employed as a bailiff? Is that still your profession?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, 25 years. It, I've been in the same court for most
Wow.
the whole entire time. So I've been real fortunate. I've had two judges in my career full time, but I've bailiff for probably about 30 different visiting
Mm.
judges and stuff like that. And
How
been real.
much does the judge's approach to running a courtroom change your role? Is it a big
Uh,
change?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
for me, anyways, they're both pretty similar, and how they wanted the courtroom ran with it. So I was able to transition. Now, some of them that are like a visiting judge coming in, depending what the case is before, but some are a little bit more laxed with it. Uh, that is a little hard for me. Like something as simple as I won't let anybody wear a hat in the courtroom.
Mm.
That's just what I was always taught, and I was taught as a kid. Those
Right.
things even.
Don't wear a hat inside. Yep.
Uh,
That was.
there, I've had a visiting judge that didn't bother him,
Mm.
and stuff like that. That's a little hard sometimes.
Yeah.
You're like, I just want to make him take the hat off.
Okay.
So
So you're still doing that work. You're still teaching. What about your own training? Where are you focused now?
I've really switched towards more of the self defense, and we've had a lot of competitors here. We still have a lot of people compete.
Mm.
My son kind of taken over that more role of helping the competitors more keen. He's really heavy into competing right now. He's only
Oh,
31,
cool.
and I've really focused, like I said, the self defense, and I'm trying to really, like I said, I try to merge the two. I'm really focused on the standing up to. I emphasize the ground, but I with the emphasis of how do we get back to our feet and get away.
Mm.
We will look for submissions, but to get them off and get back up. It's we're, we're we're not trying to have our hand raised as the winner. We're trying to survive. And I emphasize that more than anything. And survival is not being there. And we just let's get to safety.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the last piece I was thinking I wanted to ask you, because it didn't come up organically. If you're in a courtroom, you're carrying a firearm.
yes.
Where do you see that fitting in to this mix? You talked about the transition from striking into grappling. Sometimes people will split that even further, striking, wrestling, grappling, right? Talking about the different ranges. Some people put kicking out there, but I think we can all acknowledge firearms have the greatest reach.
hmm
Do you do any work on those transitions, 21-foot drills, any of that stuff?
More than anything is weapons retention.
Okay.
I spend a lot of time teaching to training weapons retention because to me that's the biggest detriment is not it's someone taking the firearm
Yeah.
as much as or you can't get it out because they're trying to take it for whatever reason with it. So and that was the biggest eye opener that once again the reality aspect of things is I remember going to I can't remember the class but we went to a class at a jiu-jitsu school and the instructor that day had us put in our training guns and stuff like
Mhm.
that and boy that changes everything
Yeah.
when you might have top control and you're putting the pressure down and you're like oh I got this and all of a sudden he's got his hands on my gun.
Mm.
And it was like a whole like, oh, ooh, this I can't finish with what I need to finish because I have to take care of that. And so it was a big game changer with stuff like that. And John sometime would keep a rubber knife inside of his gi. And I remember going for an ankle lock on him. And I was nowhere near getting it, even if he didn't have the rubber knife. But just to prove the point, he pulled it out and just sat there.
Hmm.
And I'm like, he goes, you got to remember stuff like that. Because he gave us the scenario what we were working on that day, and I let the competition still come in,
Yeah.
and he showed, taught me a lesson.
It's life is not in a vacuum.
No,
It doesn't take much to change that force dynamic and to upset the balance of where you think you are.
no,
And for me, it comes down to awareness and not assuming as little as possible.
no. I think awareness is so important. I like I said, if I have an incident in the court, and we had very few. And when I do have one, I've always been successful so far, knock on the wood, as they say, with getting it resolved and taken care of. But even so, I am so disappointed with myself at the end because
Mm.
what didn't I get? What did I miss? Who did I not talk to? How did I not pick up that this was not going to be a problem? How I couldn't have prepared for it more. So with it, and that's to me is the awareness aspect of things with it. And I think it's no different in, daily life. If I'm driving, I need to get money out of my ATM and the closest ATM is in the worst part of town, or I got to drive an extra 5 minutes to the good part and I go to the bad part of town and usually and have troubles. That's basic awareness
Right. Right.
skill.
Tony Blauer would be proud you use. I think that's one of the scenarios that he talks about.
Uh, yeah,
Drive the
that.
extra 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's literally. I mean, and that's no different. Like for me, every day. And the second part of awareness that it helps if you stay true to it, it's complacency.
Mm.
Because I think that's the biggest thing. Like for especially us, for me, or if law enforcement, security in general, any type of security positions, they'll tell you right from the get go, complacency kills, and and it does. I mean, so that this, if you stay aware and do like your research that you need to do, your information gathering, and just continue and be disciplined. It goes a long ways with your safety or self-defense aspect. And it's no different everybody every day, you know, driving around to walking through the car from, we get complacent. I mean, and when it's easy for good people to get complacent because good people don't think of bad things.
Right, right. That's not where our head is at. It makes
No.
complete sense.
Yes.
Dave, as we start to wrap up here, I'm wondering, and I know you can't name names, and you certainly can't say anything that even becomes identifiable. But you mentioned that there have been a few situations in court where things escalated.
Hmm.
Could you tell us about maybe one of those, or commonalities to them? What can we learn, perhaps?
Sure. Like probably the one that really sticks out to mind. It was we've had a Tuesday mornings when we do jury trials, and we had a jury trial coming in, and it was a criminal jury trial on it. And then in the back, close to the courtroom, there's probation offices for adult probation.
Mhm.
And this one particular probation officer was having trouble with he had taken into custody one of his clients. And the guy just was refusing. It was getting loud.
Mm.
Well, I know with a jury coming in, they don't need to hear anything about criminal crime stuff because they're going to hear cases. We want them to be neutral when they walk in. I don't want them to experience anything that's going to influence them whatsoever. So when I go back, the probation officer was like, "Hey, put your hands behind your back." He's fist her up. I'm not
Mm.
going. There ain't no one here going to be able to take me. And I'm like, we got like 20 minutes before we let these jurors in. and I just looked at the officer. I was like, okay, let's clear the chairs out. And I could, because the guy actually went behind the desk at this point. He's
Mm.
very like, and I'm like, let's just clear the chairs out. Let's get an open space here so no one gets hurt. And that was, and I said those words like, so no one gets hurt. Like, you're going in handcuffs. You're leaving this place in handcuffs one way or the other. And you could tell he kind of like, you can see he's trying to process now, like,
Mm.
do I really want to do this or not? And I told the officer, I was like, get your handcuffs ready. I'm going to get him. You put the cuffs on him. And went in, got control of him, was able to neutralize him. I always say if I have a wall or a floor, I have a partner helping me. So I used the wall to get control. We got him to the floor, and the handcuffs were put on him
Mm.
with it. But the part I would have trouble telling you, I can remember that day as plain as clear as it could be, but I don't really remember what I did.
Mm.
Yeah. I remember getting the 2-on-1 and getting like a hold, but after that, everything just went so quick, and we were on the ground, and I was on top. That's where I wanted to be. That's how it planned to be, and we was able to put him on his belly and get the handcuffs on him with it. So, and we got it all done before any juror came in. And that was my objective. That was my goal, because
Okay.
that was just important to me to have it done.
Okay.
So that's like one of them. Like and no idea that was going to happen that morning.
Mm.
Even the probation officer said I had no intentions of even wanting to put him in jail, and he just kind of started escalating a little bit, and then out of the blue, he had, I think, some type of screening or something he didn't comply with.
Mm-hmm.
It came back, and he just made the assumption he was going to go, and he turned it into a situation. So it wasn't planned
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Okay.
So
Um, where are you? It sounds like you run a pretty unique program. We might have some folks out there that are interested in checking you out.
We're in Mount Vernon, Ohio. It's
Okay.
Lashley Training Center.
Okay.
My son, like it's his gym, but I work with him and
Mhm.
help him out with everything. And I turned it over to him about 10 years ago. Let him
Oh, cool.
go full. It's a full-time job for him.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
Okay.
he runs it, and then I teach majority of the classes for
And
adults.
I've got a LashleyTrainingCenter.com is the
Yes,
note that I have here.
yeah.
Okay,
So
awesome. And if people want to get a hold of you directly, how would they best do that?
I should have an email address on the Lashley Training Center,
Okay.
but I'm on, Dave Lashley on Instagram, Facebook,
Okay.
LinkedIn is I do a lot more postings on LinkedIn more than
Okay.
anything under that. So any of those social media, there's not too many people with my name, so it's
Great.
not real common.
Well, Dave, I really appreciate you being here, and I'm going to have you close us up in a moment. And to the audience, I hope you've taken something from this, and if nothing else, I hope you'll take a step back from your own training and ask yourself what assumptions are you making? Because we're all making assumptions in our training, and where can you possibly find questions to ask and then hunt down the answers, because that's how we're going to get better. And that's Dave, that's what I was hearing from you was, these questions you didn't ask them, the answers were kind of stuffed in your face. And I think that's important, right? It helps us develop as martial artists. So thank you for being here. And how do you want to close up? What do you want to leave the audience with today out of our conversation?
I really appreciate you having on,
Of course.
uh, and I always like to get the opportunity because how you started it. A lot of people don't know what bailiffs do,
Mm,
and so I always think it's a real important part of the judicial system that maybe a lot of people don't know about, and so I always like to talk about it and go train. I think martial arts is one of the best ways to I call it like especially when I do live rolling, I call it my violent meditation.
mm,
I think we all need outlets, and martial arts to me is probably one of the best ways to get those outlets. It fulfills so many aspects of what we need for the physical and the mental aspect of things, and I just people to go train, go find a gym and train, and you'll be led to what you feel good about. It might not be the first school you go to. Maybe you know you don't like jujitsu, so you'll meet somebody or some way, and you'll be led to what you want to learn.
right.
Yeah, and I never we did. I don't know if you knew this because of it. Last year, it's actually been a year. I released an awareness book. Eyes Wide Open, Courtroom to the Street was based on my roughly 25 years experience of thousands of court hearings I've sat in. And the idea was I've sat through all these civil protection orders, domestic violence hearings and stuff. And I'd sat there and I'm like, if I could relate just a little bit of information to some of these people. I'm not saying it would have made them like give them like a superpower, like make them
Mm,
Wonder Woman or something, but maybe it could have helped prevented it. The prevention was more than anything when I would hear a lot of these cases, and or maybe got them thinking a little bit more before maybe they would have reacted to something or went to somewhere or something like that. So I took all those hearings that I've heard, and in this time, hearing wise, like criminal hearings, they tell me they figured out I've set in over like close to 20,000 hearings, 118 jury trials, um, thousands of domestic relation hearings and stuff like that. So I took all of that as much as I could and tried to give tidbits. And I made the book a real easy read.
mm,
That was my second goal. There is so much great information out there right now. It's unbelievable. But I think the simplistic of things have been forgotten. That it's got so scientific, and it's great for guys like me who love this stuff. Like, this is awesome. But for the everyday person, I was like, I think there's something missing, and you shouldn't need a 300 or 400 page book to get some basic understandings on how to keep you safe when you're out and about. So I took the other approach and kind of said, I want to use my experiences and what I've seen and what I haven't seen, and how I read people when I'm in a courtroom, what I look for, and all this trial and hearing information, and put it down and let people see if I can help them, be a little safer or be prepared. So
that's great. And where would people find that?
the best is just to go to Amazon's where it's at, and under Dave or Dave Lashley,
Search
come up
area.
Google it,
Okay.
or that.
Yeah,
So
we'll make sure we get it linked.